Welcome to Energising Life with AKR Fitness. My name is Mike. I have Lindsay with me today.
Hello.
And it's another special guest day. So we have one of our members, Patrick, joining us today. Patrick, tell us about you.
Patrick, I've been training with you, Mike, since, when was it? 2014, I think it was. Been working as an engineer up here in Aberdeen for on and off 20 odd years, which is frightening when you come to think of it. Recently got engaged to Mari. So I'm now no longer known as Mari's partner. I'm currently known as Mari's fiance.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yep. Joined the engaged club of people at AKR.
Yeah, I know.
Mari, for the listener, Mari is also a member here at AKR. But this is more about you today, Patrick. You said it was March 2014, I think. So some 7 3/4 years ago that we first started working together, which is a bit mad. But if you could take us back to that time, and what made you first sort of seek out a personal trainer, and how did you find me?
When was it? 2014. I'd just come back from a 3-week skiing trip in Canada, and I was undergoing a bit of a midlife crisis. Just turned 40, as is the way of these things. I'd been in touch with Scott Bapty about changes in diet and things like that, and I'd asked him at the time to help try and support changes in diet and weight loss, do a bit of training, personal training. I asked him for a recommendation, and he said you. That was back when you were working, before this place opened.
Yeah.
When you were working at the Napier gym.
Yeah. And so take us back. What was it like when you first reached out? Did I respond quickly? What happened? What were the first steps?
It was 7 3/4 years ago. I can't remember.
What were the first steps? Do you remember what it felt like starting?
Yeah, it was. It was an odd experience because I'd never done any training, particularly with a trainer before. Been on and off into gyms, but most of my exercise and stuff previously had been outdoors, whether that would be cycling, mountain biking, hiking, skiing, snowboarding, that sort of stuff. So it was more activity based on the sort of fitness stuff that I'd been doing. I think we met in the reception of the Nuffield gym, went over a few things, and then it was, straight into working out, and I think it was straight into the free weights area. Enough, let's not mess about with machines. Let's get straight onto the weights.
I think we might have. Did we do some sort of test or something?
Probably, yeah. Days? Oh God, yeah. I do actually remember doing. I can't remember. It was some sort of plank test, and I think I was trying to impress you when I got to about 3 minutes, but I was shaking violently at the time.
Sounds like you, Patrick.
Not what you would call a particularly elegant plank, but yeah. As you say, that was quite some time ago.
Yeah, it feels like a different life.
Yes, it certainly was.
And so your initial goals at that time were purely to lose weight. I seem to remember getting to fit into your kilt for a wedding or something like that.
Trying to remember. Yeah, I think I had a cousin's wedding sort of halfway through that year. I don't think I wore my kilt for that, just purely coincidentally. That was my main goal, was to try and support weight loss, which worked at the time. But then when you decide you like food a little bit too much, that tends to counteract that a little.
Yeah. So you were working, as you said, you were working mostly on your diet to begin with.
Yes.
And you wanted to add the sort of fitness resistance training side into it a little bit.
Yeah, and the other thing I do remember on that year was one of the things I managed to collect on my that particular skiing trip was a shoulder injury.
I remember,
and undergoing an operation later that year. That was in the August, and then getting back into training again after a shoulder operation. I seem to recall those as being the most difficult training sessions I've ever done because they involved lifting absolutely no weights whatsoever. It's one of those that, lifting heavy weights is easy, almost.
In terms of the effort.
In terms of the effort. Once you start just doing pure body weight stuff, that is evil.
Yeah.
I just remember those being really difficult.
Yeah. It was a good... it's a good period thinking back to those days. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else in that bit that I want to cover off before we move on. But I think were you coming twice a week? Would that have been right, or was it just the once?
No, I think it was just once a week.
Just once a week.
But I think back then you would run a session, a session for the training, and this is the training we'll do. But here are other
you'd have
a training schedule.
Yeah.
A program. Yeah, that's what
you'd want to do in your own time, which you were doing at work
which
gym.
you could do at the work gym.
Yeah.
So
were you doing it at the work gym?
I was doing it at the work gym.
I remember
I was in there a couple of times a week.
Yeah.
Good.
Do you know what? You could tell the people that were doing their workouts in their own time and the ones who weren't.
Yeah, because they didn't come crawling back in.
I think there was a story from the work gym as well where someone threw a kettlebell through a glass door or something.
Yeah,
like that,
that was, yes. Brand new office building, new Prime 4 buildings. I don't think we'd been in there a year, and I won't name her, just in case it comes back to me. But she'd been doing some kettlebell exercises, and there was a big atrium, and one of the rooms it's a gym room, lots of meeting rooms around it, and it was the free weights room. She just accidentally let go of the kettlebell, and it smacked huge pane of glass that just, fortunately, it didn't shatter and fall all over the.
Oh my God.
The office building. But it was very obvious.
I remember that. It's funny the things you remember. I remember the horror that
She's still not lived it down. Mostly because people like me keep repeating it to others. Yeah.
Obviously, when you and I were working together, then there's come a point where I must have said, right, I'm opening a gym. We're going to do things differently. Do you remember that? And remember your feelings about it?
Yeah, I was a bit trepidatious at the time. It's changed. I'd gotten used to training at the Nuffield gym, so
it must have been 18 months or a year at least, anyway.
Something like that, yeah. So that was another change in routine. It was there were nerves, absolutely. As I'm sure you had a lot more nerves than I did. But I remember, the green turf off to one side, the clipboards, having your own sort of program. I'm guessing that must have just been a ridiculous amount of work for you guys.
Well, everyone ends up doing the same sort of moves anyway.
Yeah.
So it just sort of naturally evolves, and then yourself, Lindsay, starting. Mike's first employee.
That was a nervous laugh. Did you hear that?
I did, yeah.
So what made you decide to sort of continue and make the leap, as opposed to wrapping up and either going elsewhere or just stopping?
I think it was the benefit. Starting to see the benefits of a space like this over Nuffield. Initially coming in, very different because there was comparatively, there was nothing there. It was a couple of machines, some dumbbells, some kettlebells, and that was it. And that was a surprise and a little bit, how's this going to work? But then you see how the different things that become available, and actually being able to have the space to move with all those weights opens up, so many more different exercises, and you realize that all those machines, all those weights, you don't need. You just need a bit of space to be able to move around and use a simple piece of equipment in several different ways to get your exercises. And now I look at those places and think, no, why would I want to be in a space like that, where it's crammed, where you can't move, where there are exercises that are just impossible because there isn't the space.
Yeah, you're a battery hen as opposed to free range.
Yeah. Didn't think of it like that, but not sure if I'm entirely comfortable with the image of me being a battery hen. But there we go. If you want to be a chicken farmer, that's
that's what that makes me, is it? So you were feeling the benefits of the training you'd done, yes. And you thought, do you know what, I'll give this a shot.
Yeah, and even things like the change from being one-on-one to a small group was, again, that's a change. That's something different, and again, a little bit of trepidation there as well. But then you start to realize that it's not just about the exercising the movements, the weights. It's interacting with other people as well who are effectively doing the same thing. As they're there for the same reason that you are, and then that provides sort of the impetus to keep coming and keep coming back, rather than going, oh God, I've got to go to the gym and do my workout. God, that's just boring and hard work. You know that when you come in, you can have a bit of a laugh and some banter, as well as doing your workout and getting that done.
So it sounds like, trepidation was the word used about going into that group format.
Yeah.
But it sounds like ultimately you found that to be a positive.
Yes, it is. Absolutely a positive.
And would you go back to one-on-one now?
Not completely. If there was something specific that I wanted to work on, perhaps, but no, because it's a bit boring, really. I mean, in fairness, we do occasionally.
You get the fear when you just see one coach and yourself, and is it just me?
That does happen on occasion, depending on which sessions you happen to make yourself available for. And there are differences between training one-on-one and a coach, and having that interaction with other people.
Yeah, I think one of the main differences that people overlook is if you've got a training relationship with a coach over a long period of time, it can get boring, or it can get stale, or it can lose its power. Whereas now here, you don't know which coach you're going to get, but there's different personalities and things. And one thing I wanted to ask you about, for some people who obviously had that relationship purely with me, they weren't training because of the gym. It was they'd come for me, and so there's a bit of a transition, even more so, because now after a while they're not getting me. They're maybe getting Lindsay on a particular day or whatever. So what were your first experiences of Lindsay, and how and how was that? So seriously, how was that as a getting used to working with different people? Or was that a thing or not?
Actually, it was a pretty positive thing, I thought, because although you've got very similar approaches to health and fitness, your personalities are a little different. So a little bit.
I wouldn't say so.
And that just allows a certain, there's a freshness, a slight, a change in perspective on how the way the session progresses, the way it unfolds, and that again is all to the good. Allowing different coaches to yes, be consistent, but also have your own personality as well.
I think I probably had more fear than any of you guys that came with me. Definitely. Oh God, what are they going to think of me? Am I good enough? This is going to be a disaster. But no, it worked out really well and really enjoyed the first couple of months.
It's a part of thing that definitely I think keeps it fresh, for you guys, for the members. The other thing I would to add there, so you and I were training once a week and you were doing your own workout in the works gym. There must have been a point fairly soon in your journey to when you were coming more frequently here than you would have done. It's another benefit of the small group model, I think.
Yeah. It was certainly training sort of on my own in the office gym held less and less appeal because that was a bit more like a traditional gym. But again, without the space to do some exercise. It was better than most of the other sort of big corporate gyms, but there were lots of things as training developed that I felt were essentially missing from the gym in the office, more around free weights, ironically enough, that were I just was finding a bit limiting. I mean, it was things like the heaviest set of dumbbells that they would buy were 25 kilos, which initially I thought was, yeah, that's fine. Why would you want more than 25 kilos? And now it's like, is that all? I need more than that. Equally, they've got a Smith machine in there for doing most of the lifts, which is fine if that's what you want to use. But I just felt that was when I was trying to use sort of the techniques that you guys have been teaching with that machine, it didn't quite fit with the body mechanics. Didn't enjoy using it, didn't like using it. So eventually it came to the point of why bother? Just come here more often.
Yeah. We'll move on a little bit, but before we do, I want to mention the two of the best ever AKR barbecues that you and I hosted at your house.
The first two where we got very lucky with the weather both times, I think. And I think, Lindsay, you tested your flexibility to the max. Slightly more than the maximum.
Yeah, I was injured for about 6 months after that. Was it the second barbecue?
I think that was the second one, yeah.
Trying to keep up with a 16-year-old Patrick, it's never going to be a win-win, is it?
No.
Great barbecues, though. Really good.
Yeah,
Loved
so
it.
for the listener, Mary and Patrick were kind enough to host the first and second AKR anniversary barbecues in their garden. So everyone brought along some food, and there was so much food.
Some food.
It was mad.
When people were coming the next day to collect things, it was like, here, take this entire trifle. Are you sure? We have 6. They either take them or they are going in the bin because we cannot possibly consume all of this and still go to a gym.
Those are good times. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, I think it was we late 2018 or maybe into 2019. You started, there was a bit of a change. You started experiencing some symptoms, and that's what we want to dive into a little bit more in this sort of chat. So tell us what happened to it.
How it started.
Yeah,
very innocuous symptoms to begin with. Basically, every now and then I started to get some pins and needles sort of sensation in my feet. So it's a bit like what I assumed, if you tie your trainers to just a little bit too tightly, not massively tightly so that you notice it straight away, and then you're wearing, shoes or trainers that are just a little bit too tight and they start to pinch and cuts off blood flow. Or is that just me who's done that?
No, I'm with you.
And then you end up getting pins and needles. Yeah. It was that sort of sensation that I was getting. So initially I assumed I've just tied my shoes too tight. But then it started happening more and more. And I knew it wasn't just my shoes that were too tight because it was first thing in the morning when I was getting out of bed. So I think that was in 2019, started to notice that went to see the GP, got referred to neurology, a few scans, and then and various other treatments. And then in January 2020, so quite a bit later, I was told that I had multiple sclerosis.
And so in that year, that from the foot things, the shoes too tight feel. Was there other things that came up in that period?
Not really. That was kind of my main symptom, although that sensation, sort of pins and needles, got more. It's got more extensive, got more often, to the point where it's now continuous.
And so, what were your thoughts? Like, so you've basically got a whole year of that. What were your what's going on in your mind at that point before you get the diagnosis?
Well, initially, with my first consultation with the neurologist, they just thought it was a bit of sort of something wrong with your nerves around about your hip. So the first MRI scan was actually of my sort of lower legs and hips. And they just happened to do a little bit of my spine as well. And it was at that point when we were reviewing that's when things sort of took a bit of a left turn. Mm-hmm. The neurologist started to become a lot more concerned. And when you're then told that, we're going to bring you in for an appointment for a lumbar puncture, that's kind of when you know that things are perhaps a little more serious than you first thought.
Yeah.
So we did that, and for anyone who hasn't had a needle in your spinal cord, it's not very pleasant. I'm not going to lie. There's an entire story there about that and about my body's reaction to that, which was not great. Mm-hmm. And a further brain and spine MRI, they'd also ordered. That was very late 2020. Along with liters, it seemed like, of blood being taken for blood tests. And when you know the tests that are being done, you tend to figure out, you almost jump ahead as to, what these tests mean. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, myself and Mary were both we figured it was, that's what the diagnosis was going to be. It was multiple sclerosis.
So you were connecting your dots.
You was connecting the dots. There are a myriad of tests that are done because there is no one test for MS. And as things get ruled out on, one by one, you end up being left with just, there's only one possible thing that it could be. And seeing those, seeing the test results and seeing it going, it's not Lyme's disease, it's not a vitamin D deficiency, it's not any one of these other things that have been tested for, just focuses the attention. And I was expecting it.
Were you preparing yourself for it?
A little bit, yeah. So that when, on that appointment, which was January 2020, the neurologist actually asked me, so what do you think? Looking at a screen of my brain with a big white dot in the middle. Not a big white dot, it's a small white dot. I'm exaggerating.
Mm-hmm. It probably looked massive.
That's probably not supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. I said, well, I'm thinking it's MS. And that's when he said, probably yes. Mm-hmm. That's what it looks like it is.
I want to sort of get into your reaction to that, but just going back to that year, because we know even, COVID has reinforced for a lot of people what's difficult deal with in life sometimes is the unknown, this hanging in the balance sort of thing. Like, so how do you feel you managed or coped with that year of 2019 where you're getting all these tests and, you know, it's maybe becoming more and more apparent, but how did you deal with that?
Well, in fairness, most of the year it wasn't MS. It was just something probably a bit wrong with the nerves in the legs, and it'll be fine. I suppose there was a strong element of denial. Although the fact I kept going over on my ankle a lot was wearing, to say the least. I kind of put it at the back of my mind, I suppose, and just didn't really think about it. It's just one of those things.
Just life's busy, getting on with work and whatever
get on
else.
With it. And it wasn't until sort of October, November time, so quite late in the year, that it became obvious that we were looking at something that was a bit more serious than just a wee bit.
And by that time, did you know? Had you already done your home research in MS? Did you know what the sort of repercussions of the diagnosis were going to be?
Yes and no. I mean, I did what everyone tells you not to do, which is do not, under any circumstances, Google your symptoms. That's the absolute worst thing you can do. But of course, I did it. Same as everybody else who has symptoms of a serious disease. And the variation was just, mind-blowing as to what it can mean. It can mean anything from absolutely nothing, really, at all, to utterly life-changing. Real life-altering symptoms that some people have. So, yeah, I didn't know what to think. But by the time we got to certainly the initial diagnosis, my primary emotion was relief.
To have an answer.
To have an answer. To have it. To have some certainty, which is an odd word to use for MS, but it was also, it was a relief in two ways. It was a relief that I wasn't making it up. There was something actually wrong with me, and that I hadn't wasted a bunch of very expensive people's time in the NHS getting scans, tests, and whatnot. So, a relief that it was something serious, which I appreciate sounds quite odd, but also at the same time a relief that it wasn't anything more serious. I wasn't going to be dead in 6 months.
Which crossed your mind?
Yeah.
Well, there's something wrong. I'm getting MRIs of my brain and my spine. People are sticking needles in my spinal cord. Yeah, you do think,
where is it going?
Where is it going? And certainly for neurological conditions, MS is at the less serious end. There are far, far worse neurological conditions out there. So I was glad I didn't have one of them.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that sense of relief came, but you also then had a new journey to venture into almost? And it doesn't, because there's so many different paths MS can take, you can't really plan for what's to come.
Yeah, that's taken a lot longer to get to. I mean, although there was an initial sense of relief for the first couple of days, you then sort of, or at least I did, went through big swings in, thought processes from, this isn't going to affect me in the slightest, everything's going to be fine and continue as it was, to, I'm going to be incontinent in a wheelchair in 3 years' time. And going back and forward from those pretty rapidly. And then eventually settling down and deciding that neither of those is likely to happen. It's going to be something else. But realizing that you don't actually know what that something else is going to be.
Yeah.
So
you've gone through a wee sort of period. So you've got all that unknown, then you get that moment of clarity and the sense of relief. And I think was it maybe that day you came? Did you come straight here afterwards? I think you and I had a quick
pretty
chat.
much, yeah.
And
it was either that day or the day
the
after.
next day, because I remember you telling me, and you seemed quite matter of fact about it all. And that, in hindsight, that was probably you in that sort of relief stage. I know where I'm at.
Yeah.
And then following that period, you've gone through a whirlwind of all these other what ifs and extremes and what's going to happen. And
yeah, you
like
got the positive side.
Yeah.
Lindsay, about 2 or 3 days later, got the she got the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a quick chat with Lindsay, and ended up and had a wee cry to myself.
Which was probably needed.
Which was probably needed. That was probably the first time. Certainly hasn't been the last.
No.
But yeah, I think that was the following weekend, and I'd spent that first weekend telling family, close friends about the diagnosis, which was kind of an odd experience because you're the one telling people, and then you're also the one calming people down, going, no, it's not that bad. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of difficulty in then having to deal with the reaction.
They've never known anything.
Yeah.
I had 3-4 months of build-up of kind of knowing it's coming, and then I hit them with a wrecking ball.
Yes, yeah, because you've had time to adjust to an extent. Yeah. And I guess, has your experience been? I'm sure most people or many people don't really know about MS or what it means for you. Would that be right?
Yes, for the most part, yes. But you do find that, especially living in this part of the world, in Aberdeen, northeast of Scotland, that the number of people who know someone who has MS is pretty high because of the prevalence in northern latitudes, especially in Scotland.
Okay.
So that's been nice, but equally, although they might know someone with MS, no, I would suppose most people don't. They've heard of it, but they don't really know what it is.
And so tell us, if you don't mind, explaining a little bit more about what it is and how it affects people.
Well, it's an autoimmune disease, which means my immune system is attacking parts of my body, specifically the coating round the nerves. They're called myelin. It's amazing what you end up being an expert in, which some people have likened to, if you think about wiring on a robot or a computer or
something. It's
something.
like the insulation.
That's the insulation. If you strip off the insulation, the signals get a bit confused. And that's essentially what happens in MS. But because it's the central nervous system, it's a disease of the central nervous system, so that's your brain, your spine, and all your nerves. They go everywhere and do everything, so the list of symptoms is vast. The more common ones, I think, are loss of sensation and control at the extremities of your limbs. I have that in my lower legs. I don't really have it in my arms and hands. Some people have it in their arms and hands as well. Vision is often affected because the optic nerve is one that's very commonly affected. I've definitely got some damage there. Fatigue is a very common symptom. I'm trying to run through as many as I can.
Are these the ones that you're all affected by?
these are ones that I'm affected by. There are other issues around bladder, because the MS nurses are always asking me about how my bladder is. So yeah, literally, incontinence can be a problem. Cognitive impairment as well. And you can lose the use of your limbs. So it's everything from fairly mild pins and needles that I have to not being able to walk, needing a wheelchair, possibly having problems swallowing.
It's a big bombshell to receive. I mean,
in fairness, I don't have all of those symptoms, to be fair.
Yeah.
But that's the reality that some people have to live with.
Yeah, but we didn't touch on it before. But before this, you and Mary were going mountain biking holidays, cycling in Cuba, skiing and snowboarding, all these sorts of things. I can imagine like that hits hard, like about all this possible things. Like, how do you feel like you come to terms with that? And like, we've used the word acceptance, and we've said you've gone through like a range of different emotions. Like, how do you feel you do it?
Well, in terms of the skiing and snowboarding, we literally went on a skiing holiday about 2 weeks after I got my initial diagnosis.
Did you?
Yes. So it was very early in 2020 when we were still allowed to travel. So we went skiing. And that was fine.
On that trip, though, is there part of your mind that's gone, this might be the last time doing this?
I hadn't, so thanks for that.
Good. So you were just like, was it more of, great, I can still do this then? Is that kind of where your mind was at?
It was more there. Certainly the neurologist, we said to him, we've got a skiing holiday booked in 2 weeks. And his reply was, great, enjoy yourself.
Yeah. And so that was the attitude you took
that was the attitude.
Yeah.
You absolutely should keep going and doing these things. Mm-hmm. Why would you not? Mm-hmm. It was kind of his response.
It's like, because I know like catastrophizing is the word, right? So when things happen, people automatically go to like the worst.
Yes.
And I think that's what I was trying to touch on, but it doesn't sound like you were there, at least on that one.
Not at that time. I've had my share of catastrophizing. So the skiing one was fine. Cycling is okay. It is mostly doable. But sort of earlier this year, we did go away for a week's mountain biking. And that was hard. Basically, if you tried to invent an activity or a sport that would absolutely do a number on your MS, you'd come up with something like mountain biking. It's short, hard efforts that massively raise your body temperature, which can cause exacerbations of your symptoms. You're in forests and trees a lot, so you've got flickering light, which if your eyesight's affected, that's not brilliant. And it requires a lot of balance and coordination, which if your limbs aren't working properly, is more difficult. So that one was tough. And there were a couple of days there when, again, frustration got the better of me. And yeah, I had a few occasions where, again, a wee cry to myself.
Mm-hmm. It's a realisation.
Yeah, it's the realisation that you're not going to be able to do what you used to be able to do.
Mm-hmm. A sense of loss.
I have read it. I have read some articles likening it to the aging process, but you're doing it about 10 times faster than normal.
Mm-hmm. So, in what way, if at all, do you feel like this has changed, like your outlook or your view of life or your way of thinking about things, as opposed to we know about some symptoms that you have and some potential changes physically, but more sort of mentally, emotionally?
Really and truly, you just have to be accepting of the fact that you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You don't know if you're going to wake up and not be able to see or not be able to move your legs. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you can't plan for things. In fact, when we were talking about, Mary and I were talking about, when we should get married, a point she raised was, do I want to wait until November next year, when my symptoms could be worse? And I had actually thought about that, and my reply was, well, my symptoms could be worse tomorrow. So it's okay to plan for the future. It's okay to delay things, because you're right. I might have all these things wrong with me, or all these things could go wrong in the meantime. You don't know when it's going to happen. So for the most part, for that side of things, I think it's trying to be as normal as possible and just continue your life. Make plans. Have to make adaptations as well, and perhaps change some long-term planning. When I'm thinking about, I'm 46. Am I 46 or am I 47? No, I'm 47. Thinking about things like, do I actually want to keep working for another 20 years before I retire? Or do I want to start making changes that will allow me to stop working maybe earlier than I otherwise would, and enjoy years that are likely to be better, rather than having more time, essentially at the end? So there are things that you have to think about and change, but you can't make radical changes in your life. That's no way to live. You still have to plan for the future.
And on that note, like, how, in terms of that bigger picture life thinking, were you that way inclined before, or has this made you think a little bit more about it?
Probably made me think a little bit more about it. It does bring things into focus, into sharp relief, a little bit more, that it's like, no, I can't just sort of bungle along and see what happens. I do have to think about things a little bit more.
And be more deliberate, I guess.
Be more, yeah.
Anything you want to add, Dennis?
No, I probably... Do you feel like you're still trying to come to terms with it all? Do you have moments of... Because you sound like right now you're very matter-of-fact, positive. This is where we're going. Do you have moments of...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like the poor me, why me, that sort of...
Not so much of that anymore. But when it's things like... when it's almost like something that's taken away from you, when you discover one more thing that you can't do, that can be a blow.
Like the mountain biking.
Like the mountain biking. And even things like, ironically, running. I would never really run beforehand. It wasn't something that I particularly enjoyed. But there's a difference between choosing not to do something and realizing that you can never do it. Even, things like crossing the road. I'll just run across No, I won't. And if a new symptom hits, that's one more thing. That can be hard. But no, I definitely don't really go for the poor me, woe is me. Not anymore.
is that a choice, do you reckon? Or is it just time and acceptance? Or like, that's what I'm curious about. Like, how does someone adopt a way of thinking that is more helpful to them rather than, do you know, is it a conscious choice or not?
There is an element of, I suppose there is an element of conscious choice in that, but that sort of thinking is frankly exhausting. And you know what, I had my time of, you know, wallowing, as everyone does when they receive sort of life-changing news. And I think that's a good thing, you know, in fairness to think about it. But that way of thinking is just so draining that eventually you've got to realise of, no, enough's enough. It's time to pick yourself up and get on with things. Now, you're never going to flick a switch and do that instantly. It's a process. And you've got to accept that you will go through periods of that. And I probably will again. But everyone goes through periods of that sort of thinking, whether you've got a chronic illness or an injury or anything going
just a
on in
bag
your life.
full of
That's
regrets or whatever else you've got. Yeah.
That's just called life.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about exercise as well, and like the role exercise plays in your life. And with regard to MS, like, have there been changes, or how do you view exercise? What's your relationship with exercise now?
There have been changes. There are things that I used to do that I can't do as much, but exercise is an extremely important part of managing certainly MS, and I would imagine a lot of chronic illnesses as well. I mean, the advice many years ago was basically, you've got MS, go home and go to bed, which is pretty close to a death sentence, I think. And that's categorically not the advice now. All exercise is I think, seen as basically a good thing, and weight training almost especially. You know, that is something that is advised to help manage symptoms, to try and slow down the progression a bit. The stronger you are, the more there is to take away. So the longer it will be until you are simply no longer capable. It's one of those things, it's a case of, it's not so much getting better, it's getting worse more slowly.
Yeah.
That's the kind of definition of a win. I have changed a lot of the exercises that I do. There has been an impact. I mean, a few years ago I would be here at the gym 4 days a week, probably doing 2 training sessions and 2 of the sort of cardio and core
classes.
The classes. And I don't really do the classes anymore because rapid movements of my legs just don't happen. They sort of the signal goes from my brain, it goes, right, move. And my legs kind of go, what? Sorry, what was that?
A wee delay.
There's a bit of a delay there happening, so lots of those things are a bit slower. So I don't do them. But I started going to a Pilates class at the Aberdeen Sports Village. That's specifically for people with neurological disorders, and that's been very helpful. Mostly in core work, and not the strength-based core work, but the stabilizing core work, and everything is almost geared towards getting that posture right, and then doing some movements, but maintaining your posture. And I've certainly found myself using those techniques a lot more.
Good.
And I still ride my bike because I enjoy it.
And
more than anything else.
as far as motivation, does knowing how important the exercise is for you, has that changed your motivation? Do you feel like, oh, I cannot miss a session now, or is it just the same as it always is?
No, I think it's the same as it always is. I mean,
that's what I would have thought.
You can't be overly regimented. I mean, there are going to be days when it'll be a case of, no, I'm not doing that, or I'm just too exhausted, and recognizing that that's okay to just go, no, I've spent all the energy I can spend today, and there will be other days when it's I'm bouncing around.
I'm wary of time. Is there anything else that that you wanted to share or speak about in relation to this that we maybe haven't asked the right question?
No, I don't think so. It is quite a strange thing to be diagnosed with a chronic illness, and it's something that you do have to come to terms with, and it does change your view a little bit of you and how you think about yourself. I suppose one of the things that still goes through my mind is, do I have a disability? To which the answer is still, I don't know. But also there's another part of me going, does it matter? Because although, the MS is what I have, it's not what's going to define me. I'm still the same stupid 20-year-old in my head that I always was. And that's probably how I'm going to stay.
So in some ways, there's a whole chunk of change, but and on the other hand, not all that much has changed.
I'm completely different whilst remaining unchanged. Remaining unchanged.
Yeah.
Which is a juxtaposition, I suppose. But yeah, that's how I feel, and I imagine, although all I can do is speak about my own condition, my own experience. I would imagine that's how most people with chronic illness and disability would feel.
You're still you.
Still me, for better or for worse, depending on your perspective.
Well,
Do you know what? It's interesting. I've heard. I don't know. I've never dived in to see how legitimate these stories are, but I've heard stories of studies where they compare people who've won the lottery or people who've become paralyzed or things like that, and they talk about almost like this set point. And I know there are some theories in the world of happiness around sort of set points. But so the people that win the lottery have this surge of a high, and then 6 months later they feel just kind of the same. And then the same with people who've lost the use of the legs or something like that. They go all through this, and then ultimately they kind of come back to this set point of who they are. So of course, if you've lost your legs, your life's going to be a lot different. But ultimately in your head, and just some of what you're saying sort of strikes me a little bit like that. There's a whole bit of going through to go through.
Yep. And I will keep going through it because it's a progressive condition. But yeah, I'm still going to be me.
Lindsay, was there anything else you wanted to?
I just wanted to say that it's just, since the moment you told me, it's just been really inspiring to see you come in, get stuck in, and try the things that you did. If they don't work, the exercises, we switch it out, you move on. It just seems like you've taken it in your stride with the exercise, and you'll do what you can. And I just wanted to say, very inspiring. So keep doing you.
Thank you.
And all right, well, is there anything else you want to leave the listener with?
I think I've probably dropped enough of a bombshell on people.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. Patrick, absolute pleasure, not just today, but 7 3/4 years since you walked into my life, and we've worked together, and it's been a pleasure working with you, getting to know you and Mary, and as Lindsay said, inspiring. Not just this, but the the adventure holidays and the barbecues and everything else in between. So thanks for being with us. To the listener, thanks for listening. I hope you've found some value, some insight, some inspiration in Patrick's story. And we will be back for another episode soon. Thank you.